Hello. We are going to talk about the power of no. There is only one job that I have been for and I didn't get. It was in the early 90s. I was in my early 20s, and I wasn't sure quite what I was going to do with my life. I tried a couple of things and I wasn't quite sure. And so I thought, well, I like travel. I'm going to go for a job as an air steward. So I signed up, I got an interview, and it was a group interview. So I thought, great, I love working with people. This is going to be good. I'm going to really enjoy this process. Then the first part of the meeting was us being asked to stand on a set of scales in the middle of the room, surrounded by all the other people in the room, with a person with a clipboard, writing down, saying out loud, and then writing down our weight onto this piece of paper. I was mortified. I was quite young. I was a bit insecure about my body, even though I was young and slim and gorgeous. I didn't realize that at the time. So I did not want to stand on these scales. I did not want my weight spoken out loud, and I didn't want it recorded on a piece of paper to be shared with other people in a room who I had yet to meet. So when it came to my turn to step on the scales, what did I do? Did I say, no, thank you, this is not for me, or this is not quite what I realized it was going to be, and leave? Or did I just say, no, thank you, I'm not doing that? No, I didn't do any of those things. I dutifully stepped on the scales, had my weight read out loud, had it written on a piece of paper, and carried on through. And I resented them entirely for that process. So why didn't I say no? What was going on? Well, back in my early 20s, I did not have secure boundaries. I did not know what I was willing and not willing to put up with in a workspace. I didn't know what it was okay for me to say no to. I didn't understand that process. And so my boundaries were very, very leaky and malleable. And so I'd find myself doing things and saying things and doing bits of work that I didn't really want to be doing. But I didn't know about boundaries, and I didn't know how to say no to things. And also, I felt obliged. I felt obliged to do this task because someone older, more senior, was asking me to do this particular thing. And I didn't want there to be an emotional kind of outbreak in that space with me saying no. I didn't want to feel embarrassed. I didn't want to embarrass them. I didn't want to stand out from the crowd. So I felt obligated to go along because I knew that any emotion that was going on, I could swallow internally and have it kept inside me, and nobody would really know what was going on. And in that moment, I didn't choose myself. I didn't choose me. I chose them. I chose it to be easy for them. I chose it so that I would go along with their requests and their demands, not go along with what felt right or wrong for me and stand up for that. So I would rather feel uncomfortable than allow that other person to understand I wasn't going to play this particular game. So why am I telling you about this? Well, it's actually really relevant for our workplace today. There are many, many women that I work with who find even the thought of saying no, let alone the actuality of saying no, really, really challenging. It feels very, very difficult because as women, on the whole, we want to work collaboratively. We want to work with the group of people that we're with. We want to do our best work for them and with them. And saying no can feel really, really uncomfortable. And generally, human beings, we don't really enjoy conflict. There are a few people who do enjoy conflict, and they see it as a game and they enjoy the kind of battle of wits. But most of us, in most of our working scenarios, don't enjoy conflict. It doesn't make us feel good, and we don't enjoy the prospect of it. The idea that us saying something might start or create some conflict. And those two things added together, this idea of really wanting to work collaboratively and not wanting to create conflict, really means that it can be very difficult if you haven't been intentional about building your boundaries. So you end up saying yes to things when in fact, actually, what you really mean is no. And then you go along, like I did with stepping on those scales, and you do the thing you've said yes to, and you're resenting it as you go along. You're not enjoying it. You're not bringing your best to it. and you're doing it all because you said yes when actually really what you meant was to say no. Now, if any of this is resonating with you, there's some things you can do to start to notice how often this is happening. Because before we start to change any behavior, and there's going to be 2 more videos in this series, before we start to change any behavior, we have to notice how regularly it's happening, right? All of us will say yes to something that we're actually really meant to say no to. And if we're doing that infrequently, that's okay. We can kind of manage that and we'll become better at noticing it and stopping doing that. But if it's happening very frequently, the chances are you're not even noticing it. You're just generally feeling a bit blah. So our first job is to notice. So when somebody makes a request of you and you say yes, try to tune in to that internal dialogue. What is going on in your mind? Are you thinking, oh, why did I say yes to that? Or is there any sense of, well, I ought to do this, I should do this, it's important that I do this because... If there's any of that kind of language, the sort of should language, then it's probably an inherited value. So we've inherited it from society, from our family, from our work culture of, we ought to be doing this thing. So just notice, is there any of that kind of language going on? Notice if there's any sense of inner critic going, why did you say yes to that? You should have said no. See, you're always doing this. You're always taking on more than you can cope with. You're probably going to stuff this up. So notice, is there any inner critic dialogue going on as well? So notice, the very first thing to do, notice, is there any internal dialogue? Is there any commentary going on that suggests that yes probably should have been a no? Now, some of us are more tuned into what's going on in our minds than others. So for some of you, that's going to feel really easy. For others, it's a little bit harder. So the second thing you can start to notice is your body. How does your body feel when you've said yes to something? Do you find your stomach is clenching up? Do you find your knees have gone really tight? Or maybe your fists, or maybe you're drumming your fingers or doing a repeated tapping, something like that. Is there a repeated movement that's going on? Are you noticing that your jaw has tightened up? Or your throat, and you've got that sensation that you might get just before you cry, that sort of tightness in the throat. If we get tightness there, it's usually to do with our tongue tightness and to do with the throat muscles constricting, and we're trying to stop ourselves from saying something we don't want to say. So there's an interesting sort of physiological thing that we can notice going on there. So notice your breathing, has that changed? So anything that you can notice that's physically changing in you. And then if those 2 things aren't apparent to you, notice how you feel after you finish the task. So you've done the thing that you've been asked to do. Do you finish it and go, actually, yeah, that felt really good? Or do you finish it and go, oh, thank goodness for that, it's done. Oh, I'm never saying yes to that thing again. Notice that physical, that mental reaction to completing the task, because that will give you really good information on how you really felt about it. So the 3 things you need to notice: internal dialogue. What are you saying to yourself about that task and about saying yes to it? Physically, what is going on? Can you notice any tensions at all in the body? And the third thing, how do you feel when you've finished? Now, with all these things, we're aiming for 80-20, right? We're always going to say yes to things that maybe we should have said no to. But as long as 80% of the time we've got clear, firm boundaries and we're saying no to the things that we genuinely don't want to do and yes to the things that we do want to do, then we're doing well. If we find that balance is more like 60-40 or 50-50, then we really need to start noticing how often, when and where we're saying yes when actually we really mean no. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.